The sun was already setting when Keanu Reeves walked quietly through the gates of the old racing track. The place was buzzing with young racers and their flashy cars, engines roaring and people laughing. Keanu looked a little out of place in his worn-out jeans and plain black jacket, but there was something in his eyes that made a few people stop and watch him. He carried no helmet, no gloves, no racing shoes, just himself and a small bag slung over his shoulder. For years, this track had been a training ground for young racers dreaming of big races and fast fame. The coach, a man named Darren, stood near the pit area with his arms folded. He was known for his strict rules and loud laughs. He always said racing was no place for old movie stars trying to relive their youth. When he saw Keanu walking up to him, he couldn't hide the smirk on his face. Keanu stopped a few steps away from Darren. He looked around at the track. The cars, the people, the smell of burning rubber in the air. It reminded him of days long ago, when he was just a boy watching street racers speed through the canyons of Los Angeles. Back then, he would sit on the curb with his helmet, waiting for someone to give him a chance. No one did. Now, standing here, he felt like that boy again. Except the years had taught him something powerful. Patience was stronger than speed. Darren cleared his throat and looked Keanu up and down. "You lost, old man," he asked loudly so that a few young racers nearby could hear and laugh. Keanu only smiled. "I'd like to try the track," he said, his voice calm but firm. Darren's laugh echoed across the pit. "You, in these cars, do you even know how to handle a drift?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough. "This isn't some Hollywood movie scene, Mr. Action Hero. Here, people crash for real." Keanu nodded. "I know, that's why I'm here." For a second, the coach didn't know what to say. Something about Keanu's eyes, steady, warm, unshaken, made him pause, but pride was louder than respect. For Darren, he pointed to a shiny silver car parked near the pit. "Fine, that one's open. You break it, you pay for it. I'll be watching. Try not to embarrass yourself." The young racers gathered, whispering to each other. Some took out their phones, ready to film the movie star failing on the track. They had all heard stories of actors pretending to be tough, stories of men trying to prove they still had it when they clearly didn't. But Keanu was different. He walked to the car slowly, brushing his hand along the smooth metal. He slipped inside like he had done it 1,000 times before, adjusting the seat, his fingers dancing across the wheel. The gear shift inside the car. The world outside faded. He closed his eyes for a moment. Memories of the first time he sat behind a wheel came rushing back. He was just 17, broke and bruised from life, but there was freedom in the driver's seat. No scripts, no cameras, no second takes. Just the road and the choices he made every second. He turned the key. The engine roared to life, deep and raw, vibrating through his bones. Outside, Darren folded his arms tighter, his face stuck in a mocking grin. "Let's see what you've got," he muttered under his breath. Keanu pulled onto the track, slow. At first, the tires whispered across the asphalt. He could feel every bump, every curve waiting for him. The young racers leaned over the barriers, expecting a mistake, a slip, a spin-out. But Keanu's eyes were sharp, his hands steady on the wheel. He took the first corner with grace. No squeal, no screech, just a smooth glide that made a few people blink in surprise. Then he pressed the gas. The car shot forward, hugging the curve like it was a part of him. He shifted gears effortlessly, the engine singing louder. A small drift on the next turn, clean, precise. The crowd's laughter died down, replaced by silence and a few gasps. Even Darren straightened up, his smirk slowly melting from his face. Keanu felt the wind in his hair, the pull of the wheel, the push of the tires against the limits. He wasn't trying to show off. He wasn't trying to win anyone's respect. He was just driving, for himself, for the boy he once was, for the years that had passed like blurred streetlights. He drifted into the sharpest curve, the car spinning, just enough to kiss the edge of danger, then snapping back into control. The smell of burning rubber filled the air as he pushed through the final stretch, the car roaring down the straight line like a freed beast. When he rolled back into the pit area, The silence was so thick you could hear the cooling engine click. Keanu stepped out of the car, brushing a bead of sweat from his forehead. He didn't look at the phones still recording him. He didn't need to. He walked up to Darren, who now struggled to find his voice. The coach's eyes darted around, looking for something smart to say, but there was none. Respect had replaced pride, and it felt heavy in the air. Keanu smiled, a gentle, humble smile that made the moment even more powerful. "Thanks for the car," he said softly. "Needed to remember what freedom feels like." Darren opened his mouth but only managed a nod. Round them, the young racers were no longer laughing. They watched him with wide eyes, not just at the drift, but at the man who had drifted through life with the same quiet grace. In that moment, Keanu didn't just win a race. He reminded everyone there that true respect is never taken by force or noise. It's earned in silence when no one expects it, and no one can deny it. The night after Keanu's silent victory on the track, word spread fast. Videos of his drift hit every corner of the internet. Young racers replayed the clip over and over, the way he moved the car, the calm in his eyes. The moment the coach's laughter turned into respect. But for Keanu, the night ended quietly. He stayed back after everyone left, sitting alone on the hood of the car, staring at the empty track under the moonlight. He remembered the feel of the wheel, the rush of the wind, the honesty of speed. He knew tomorrow would be different. People would expect something more. Some would want to test him, others would want to learn from him. But Keanu didn't come here to prove he was the best. He came to remember who he was before the fame. A boy who found freedom on the road when life felt too heavy to carry. The next morning, the pit area was louder than usual. Cars lined up for practice runs, engines revving, exhaust fumes clouding the air. Darren, the coach, stood near the same silver car, his arms crossed, but this time his eyes held a different weight. He spotted Keanu approaching, helmet in hand. This time, and nodded without a word. "Heard we got a new challenger," Darren said, forcing a small smile. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Challenger?" Darren jerked his thumb over his shoulder. A bright red sports car stood at the far end of the pit. Leaning against it was a young man named Jace, 22, fearless and desperate to prove himself. He was the fastest on the track before Keanu showed up, and the idea that an old actor stole his spotlight made his blood boil. "He wants to race you," Darren added. "Says you got lucky yesterday. Wants to see if you're for real." Keanu sighed. He didn't come here for this. He looked at Jace, who smirked and gave him a mocking wave. The other racers gathered quickly, whispering, betting, some hoping to see a crash that would humble the legend. "Do I have to?" Keanu asked quietly. Darren leaned in, lowering his voice. "If you don't, he'll never let it go. You taught them something yesterday, Keanu, about respect, but kids like him, they need to feel it on their skin." Keanu looked at the track, the curves that waited like old friends. He didn't want to embarrass the kid. He wanted to teach him, but lessons on the track always came with risks. He took a deep breath and walked over to Jace's car. "We don't need to do this," Keanu said calmly. "It's not about who's better, it's about the ride." Jace scoffed. "Save your movie lines, old man. When I pass you on the second lap, maybe you'll finally retire for good." Keanu studied the boy's eyes, burning with anger, pride, and a fear he wouldn't admit. He nodded once. "Okay, one lap, we keep it clean." The racers cheered, climbing the barriers for the best view. Phones came out again. Darren gave the signal. The engine started, Keanu's silver car and Jace's red beast, side by side. On the start line, the air vibrated with raw energy. The smell of gasoline thickened the nose. The flag dropped. Tires screamed as they shot forward. Jace took the lead on the straight, his car roaring like a wild animal. Keanu stayed close behind, calm hands on the wheel, eyes sharp on the road ahead. The first corner came fast. Jace braked too late, his car skidding wide. Keanu drifted past him on the inside, smooth and silent, like water finding its path. The crowd roared. Jace cursed under his breath, slamming the gas, trying to catch up. The next curve was tighter. Keanu felt the car lean with him, his fingers light but sure. The track blurred around him, but he saw every detail. the tiny cracks on the asphalt, the orange cones flicking past, the reflection of headlights in the rearview mirror. Jace pushed harder, desperate to overtake. He clipped Keanu's rear bumper once, a sharp knock that made the tires squeal. But Keanu didn't panic. He steadied the wheel, shifted gears, and opened the gap again. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. The track was his story, and he was telling it, one drift at a time. As they neared the final stretch, Jace's car wobbled. His tires were too hot. His brakes overworked. He lost control for a split second, enough for his car to slide toward the barrier. Keanu spotted it in his mirror. Without thinking, he slowed down, dropping speed he didn't need to lose. He swung his car just wide enough to create space, giving Jace room to regain control. The young racer's eyes widened. He straightened the wheel, the barrier inches away. Somehow, he made it back onto the track, shaking but safe. Keanu crossed the finish line seconds later, but he didn't raise his hands in victory. He pulled into the pit, climbed out, and walked straight to Jace, who parked behind him. His face pale, and his pride cracked wide open. Jace stepped out, fists clenched, but there was no fight left in him. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good out there," he said softly, "but speed without control is just noise. You want to be fast, first learn to be patient." The pit area was quiet. Darren watched from a distance, his face unreadable. The young racers didn't cheer, they didn't laugh. They just stood there, feeling the lesson settle in their bones. Respect was never about beating someone down. It was about lifting them up when they lost their way. Jace nodded slowly, his eyes dropping to the ground. "Thank you," he whispered, voice raw. Keanu squeezed his shoulder once more, then turned back to his car. He knew this was just the beginning. The track had more to teach to him, to the coach, and to every racer waiting for their chance to drift past their fears. The next few days at the track felt different. The laughter and whispers had changed. Now, when Keanu walked through the pit area, people didn't smirk behind his back. They watched him with a kind of quiet curiosity. Some still didn't understand him. They didn't get why he would slow down to help a rival, or why he drove like he was telling a story instead of trying to win a trophy. But they couldn't deny the way he made them feel, like respect wasn't about speed or fame, but about knowing when to hold back and when to push forward. Jace, the young racer who had challenged him, was now his shadow. He followed Keanu everywhere, asking questions, watching how he adjusted the seat, how he checked tire pressure, how he closed his eyes before starting the engine. At first, some older racers teased Jace for sucking up to the old guy, but Jace didn't care. He knew he had seen something on that track that changed him. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Keanu sat on a crate by the pit wall. Jace sat beside him, fiddling with his helmet strap. The track was empty, but the echoes of engines still danced in the air. "Why did you slow down for me?" Jace asked suddenly. His voice was small, almost like he was afraid to hear the answer. Keanu looked at him, his eyes soft but serious. "Because crashing isn't winning. Anyone can press the gas and hope for the best. It takes more strength to know when to let go." Jace stared at the ground, letting the words sink in. "My dad used to race," he said quietly. "He crashed once, broke his leg so bad he never got back in the car. He always told me I was too much like him, too stubborn." Keanu nodded. "Stubbornness is good. It keeps you standing when life tries to knock you down. But stubborn without wisdom, that's when you crash." The two sat in silence for a while. The night grew darker. The other racers packed up, cars loaded onto trailers, the hum of engines fading into the distance. But Keanu stayed, feeling the heartbeat of the track under his feet. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Darren, the coach, walking toward them. Darren looked different. The usual pride in his stride was softened by something else. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was something deeper. He stood in front of Keanu and Jace, hands in his pockets. "We got an invite," Darren said, clearing his throat. "There's a regional drift competition next week. Best local teams, best drivers." They asked if we're sending someone. Keanu raised an eyebrow. You want to send Jace? Jace perked up, eyes wide with hope. But Darren shook his head. I want to send both of you. Kid's good, but he needs a co-driver, someone to teach him, keep him steady. They've got a tandem drift event. 2 cars, 1 team. Keanu looked at Jace, who was already nodding eagerly. I don't know, Keanu said, his voice low. I didn't come here to compete. I came here to feel the road again, to remember. Darren stepped closer. Maybe that's exactly why you should do it. These kids, they need someone like you on that track. Not just to win, but to remind them why they're here. Keanu looked out at the track, empty now but alive in his mind. He remembered the boy he used to be, standing at the edge of life, waiting for a chance, any chance, to prove he was worth something. Maybe this was his chance to pass that on. He took a deep breath and nodded once. Okay, we'll do it. Jace jumped to his feet, grinning. We're gonna crush it, he shouted. Keanu smiled but lifted a finger. We're not gonna crush anything, he said with a chuckle. We're gonna drift it. Smooth, clean. Together, the next morning, practice began. The track became their classroom. Keanu showed Jace how to feel the road through the wheel, how to listen to the tires, how to drift side by side without touching. They practiced for hours, burning rubber until the sunset turned the sky pink. Every slip, every near miss, every spin out became a lesson. The other racers watched, some in awe, some in disbelief. They saw how Jace, once cocky and reckless, now followed Keanu's lead, patient, focused, humble. Darren stood by the pit wall every day, arms crossed but eyes warm. He saw his racers changing, not just in skill but in spirit. One night, after another long practice, Keanu sat alone in the garage. He leaned back against the silver car, staring at the dusty ceiling. His body ached, his hands were sore, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He thought of all the roads he had traveled, the streets, the sets, the cities that cheered his name but never really knew him. Here, on this old track, he wasn't a star. He wasn't an action hero. He was just a driver, drifting through life, finding freedom in every turn. And tomorrow, he knew, they would push harder. The competition was coming. The crowds would watch. The lights would shine. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, the quiet night, the smell of oil and rubber, the promise that he could still teach someone what respect really meant. The week before the competition felt like a blur. Every day started before the sun rose and ended long after it set. The track lights stayed on through the night, throwing shadows across the asphalt as Keanu and Jace practiced their tandem drifts over and over again. Each run brought mistakes, laughter, sometimes frustration, but slowly, the spaces between those mistakes grew smaller. Keanu knew the boy was changing. Jace's sharp edges were still there, but they were smoother now, like a rough stone being turned over in a river. Each drift brought him closer to understanding that speed was nothing without control. Sometimes, late at night, Jace would ask about Keanu's life, about movies, about the stories he'd heard. Keanu never bragged. He just talked about the moments that felt real, not the lights or the red carpets, but the times he sat alone, wondering who he really was when no one was watching. Coach Darren watched all of this from the sidelines. He didn't bark orders like before. Instead, he offered small tips, a nod here, a clap there. He saw the respect growing between the two drivers and knew that was worth more than any trophy. On the last night before they would leave for the regional competition, the team gathered in the garage. They ate greasy takeout on the hood of one of the cars. Laughter filled the air, the kind that only comes when people feel like they belong to something real. Then Darren stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. Listen up, he said, his voice echoing through the garage. Tomorrow's not just about showing off. It's not about proving you're the fastest on the track. It's about showing them who you are when you're behind that wheel. You, too, he pointed at Keanu and Jace. You remind everyone out there that respect isn't given. It's earned, and sometimes it's given back twice as strong. Keanu glanced at Jace, who was nodding, eyes focused, no cocky grin this time, just the quiet fire of someone who understood what was at stake. The morning of the competition came with a light drizzle. The track at the regional event was bigger, louder, surrounded by grandstands filled with people. Banners fluttered in the wind, sponsors showing off their colors. Other teams arrived with expensive cars, flashy paint jobs, and crowds of fans. Keanu and Jace pulled in with their beat-up trailer and 2 cars that were fast but humble. No big decals, no roaring music. They didn't need to announce themselves. They knew the track would speak for them. Some of the other teams laughed when they saw Keanu. Whispers spread. People nudged each other. Is that really him? What's he doing here? They expected a celebrity moment, maybe a few selfies, maybe a publicity stunt that would end in failure. But Keanu ignored them. He focused on checking tire pressure, tightening bolts, talking Jace through the plan for each turn. When their names were called for the first round, the crowd leaned forward. 2 cars lined up, Keanu in the silver car, Jace in the red. The signal dropped, engines roared. They moved like twin shadows across the wet track, drifting so close they could have touched mirrors. The rain made the asphalt slick, but Keanu trusted the road and trusted Jace. Every turn felt like a heartbeat. They slid through hairpins, tires sending up thin mists of water. The crowd gasped when they saw how close the cars came to the barriers, to each other, but never collided. Each drift was a conversation. Keanu leading, Jace answering, both of them speaking through the squeal of tires and the hum of engines. When they crossed the finish line, there was no big celebration. Keanu rolled down his window, gave Jace a thumbs up, and the boy laughed for the first time that day, the nervous edge melting from his shoulders. The judges whispered to each other, nodding. The other teams watched, some with narrowed eyes, realizing that the so-called movie star was more than just a famous name. The rounds continued. Each run brought new challenges, tighter corners, more aggressive competitors, crowds that cheered louder each time they drifted by. At one point, another team tried to block them, forcing Jace's car too close to the edge. The tires kissed. The gravel, the car wobbled, but Keanu tapped his brakes, adjusted his line, and gave Jace the space to correct. They finished the run with a flourish that sent the stands roaring. Back in the pit area, Jace pulled off his helmet, his hair sticking to his forehead with sweat and rain. "How do you stay so calm?" he asked, breathing hard. Keanu handed him a bottle of water, his own smile tired but genuine. "Because when you're calm, you see more. Panic closes your eyes. Calm opens them." As the sun dipped low, the final round was announced. It would be them against the reigning champions. 2 brothers known for their reckless but flashy drifts. They were famous for pushing other cars wide, for forcing mistakes. Jace knew it. His jaw tightened as he watched them rev their engines. Laughing and pointing at him, Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "We don't race them," he said softly. "We race the road. The road never lies." The boy nodded. No words this time, just trust. They strapped into their cars. Engines roared one last time. The crowd rose to its feet. Phones came out. The rain fell harder now, turning the track into a mirror of lights and shadows. When the signal dropped, they launched forward, 2 cars moving like a single heartbeat, ready to drift not just for victory, but for the respect that comes when you show the world who you really are under the roar of the rain. The rain fell harder now, each drop splashing against Keanu's windshield like tiny reminders of how alive he felt behind that wheel. The final round was here. The crowd leaned over the barriers, umbrellas and ponchos doing little to block the sound of engines roaring through the wet air. The brothers they were up against were legends on this track, fearless, ruthless, and ready to force mistakes out of anyone who dared to share the road with them. Keanu sat in his silver car, eyes closed for a moment. He could feel the vibrations of the engine, the weight of the rain pressing down on the track, the quiet breathing of Jace in the car beside him. He opened his eyes, turned his head, and found Jace looking at him, the boy's face tense, his hands gripping the wheel too tight. Keanu lifted a gloved hand, signaled to relax. Jace blew out a shaky breath. "I'm ready," he mouthed through the window. Keanu nodded. They didn't need any more words. The flag dropped, for cars shot forward like arrows. The first curve came quick, a wide, sweeping left. The brothers took it hard, skimming the edge, water spraying from their tires. Keanu and Jace fell in behind. moving like shadows, mirrors of each other's line. The second curve was tighter. The inside was slick, almost like ice. One of the brothers tapped his brakes late, sending a spray of water right into Jace's windshield. The young racer flinched, wiping his visor, but kept the wheel steady. Keanu drifted closer, the nose of his car barely a hand's width from Jace's bumper, guiding him through the blind corner. The crowd screamed as the cars danced through the rain. Sparks flew when one of the brothers scraped the guardrail, but he didn't lose control. Instead, he laughed through the radio. Their tactics were clear now. Push, shove, block the line, make them panic. Halfway through the lap, the lead brother cut across Keanu, forcing him wide. Jace saw it too late, his tires slipping toward the edge. For a heartbeat, it looked like he would spin out into the grass, but Keanu didn't blink. He feathered his brakes, swung wide, and then darted inside the brother's line, forcing him to open up the curve. The gap was just enough for Jace to slip through and straighten out. In the pits, Darren held his breath. The other racers watched, in silence. Every pair of eyes was locked on the two cars that shouldn't have stood a chance against the champions, but here they were, drifting with a grace and unity that felt almost unreal. As they entered the last series of bends, the brothers pulled their final trick. They boxed Keanu in, the lead brother on his left, the second on his right. Their cars drifted wide, blocking any chance of escape. Jace was behind, searching for a way through but seeing none. The rain made everything slippery, every wrong move a disaster waiting to happen. Keanu's mind went quiet, no panic, no anger. He felt the wheel, the tires, the curve of the road. Then, like a whisper in his head, he saw it, the smallest gap, a heartbeat of space opening on the inside of the next bend. He tapped his brakes, let the brothers drift just a hair too wide, then squeezed his car through the gap so tight that his mirror clipped the barrier. Sparks flying into the rain. Jace saw the line open behind him. He didn't hesitate. He trusted Keanu completely now. He pressed the gas, followed the path like a ghost chasing its echo. Together, they shot past the brothers, water spraying from their tires like twin comets. The finish line loomed ahead, a strip of white shining under the floodlights. Keanu's heart thumped once, twice, then settled. They weren't racing the brothers anymore. They were racing the road, and the road was theirs. When they crossed the line, the stands erupted. It wasn't the roar of fans for celebrities or heroes. It was the roar of people who knew they'd just witnessed something honest, something that couldn't be faked. Respect, not just for the skill, but for the spirit that held those cars together in the rain. Keanu eased his car into the pit area. The engine ticked as it cooled, steam rising from the hood. Jace climbed out of his car, helmet still on, chest heaving. He stumbled over to Keanu and pulled off his helmet, his eyes wide, a boy's grin breaking across his face. "We did it," he breathed. "We really did it." Keanu just smiled. "You did it," he said softly. "You trusted the road. You trusted yourself." The brothers parked a few yards away, climbing out without a word. They didn't look angry. They didn't look smug. They just looked quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you realize you've been taught a lesson you didn't see coming. One of them gave Keanu a nod, small but genuine, before walking off into the rain. Coach Darren pushed through the crowd, his hair wet, his face beaming. He clapped Jace on the back so hard the boy nearly stumbled. Then he turned to Keanu, his voice cracking. "Never seen drifting like that in my life. Never seen trust like that either." Keanu chuckled. "It wasn't the drift," he said, looking at Jace. "It was the space between the drifts. That's where you find respect." The crowd began to clear. The lights dimmed. The rain softened into a gentle mist. Keanu sat on the hood of his car, helmet in his lap, watching Jace talk and laugh with the other racers. There was no big trophy, no fireworks, but that didn't matter. The lesson was enough. He closed his eyes and let the sound of the rain wash over him. The track, the road, the drifting, it was all part of the same story. A story about how sometimes you don't have to be the loudest to be remembered. Sometimes you just have to be there, steady, kind, patient enough to let others find their way. And tomorrow, the road would still be there. waiting for him to drift through its curves once more. The rain stopped sometime in the middle of the night, leaving the track slick and shining under the floodlights. Keanu stayed long after the crowd left. He sat on the hood of his car, listening to the cooling tick of the engine and the soft drips of water falling from the roof of the pit shelter. Round him, the team cleaned up, putting away tools, wiping down the cars, rolling up cables. But they did it quietly, like they didn't want to break the peace that had settled over the place. Jace sat cross-legged on the ground, still in his racing suit, staring at the trophy they'd been handed. It wasn't big, just a small medal, played on a wooden base, but to him, it meant more than gold. He looked up at Keanu and laughed. "Funny, hub, all this time I thought the trophy was the point." Keanu smiled, that soft, knowing smile that made people feel like he was listening, even when he didn't speak. "Sometimes you think the finish line is the end," he said, tapping the hood beside him. "But the road keeps going. You learn that when you've been driving long enough." Darren, the coach, joined them, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. He looked tired but proud. "That was the cleanest run I've ever seen. No cheap shots, no forced mistakes, just skill and trust." He paused, glancing at Jace and Hart. "Don't forget that part." Jace nodded, hugging the trophy to his chest for a second before setting it down on the pit wall. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice small, almost like a child asking his father what tomorrow would look like. Keanu stretched his arms behind him, leaning back to look at the starless sky. "Now you keep driving, you keep drifting, you show the next kid who thinks it's all about speed that it's really about patience. You show them that crashing doesn't make you brave, staying in control does." The boy sat with that for a moment. He turned the words over in his head, the way he once turned the wheel to sharply, to fast. Now he knew better. He knew the road had more to teach him, and he was finally ready to listen. As they packed up to leave, other racers came by, one by one. Some shook Keanu's hand. A few clapped Jace on the shoulder. Even the two brothers from the final round stopped to nod at them both, respect in their eyes, grudges left behind on the wet asphalt. Keanu felt it in his bones, the way drifting brought people together, the way trust could grow in the space between fear and control. It wasn't about beating someone else. It was about beating the parts of yourself that wanted to panic, to quit, to look away. They loaded the cars onto the trailer. The old silver car, paint chipped at the edges, looked more beautiful now than any shiny new beast on the lot. It had carried him through curves and storms, just like life had. Before they pulled out, Darren stood by Keanu's window. "You ever think you'll race for real again? Big leagues, I mean?" the coach asked, half serious, half curious. Keanu thought. For a long moment, he looked at Jace sleeping in the passenger seat, the trophy balanced on his lap. He looked at the track in the rearview mirror, lights flickering in the distance like stars returning after a storm. "This was real enough for me," he said. His voice was calm. No regret, no sadness, just truth. Darren nodded. He knew what that meant. As they drove away, the road stretched out before them, wet, winding, endless. Keanu didn't press the gas too hard. He didn't need to. He felt the hum of the tires, the steady pull of the wheel, the quiet breath of the night. Around them. Beside him, Jace stirred, opened one sleepy eye, and grinned. "You're gonna teach me how to handle hairpins in the rain, right?" he mumbled. Keanu laughed, the sound soft and warm. "Yeah, kid. We've got plenty of roads left for that." And somewhere, miles ahead, another curve waited, another drift, another lesson in patience, trust, and the respect that's never given, only earned. The road never ends, and for Keanu Reeves, that's exactly how it should be.